Huw, I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about what the initiatives you're spearheading in Cardiff and as part of the Core Cities Group are doing to promote greater cooperation both at home and overseas.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. And really intimidated by Sheila's timing discipline there. I will try and follow her great example. Just to set the local context, Cardiff, obviously the capital city of Wales, we've always been an outward-looking city, and that's in no small part due to our history as a port city, becoming one of the largest coal export ports in the world at the turn of the 20th century, and becoming home through that to some of the first immigrant communities in Britain as sailors from across the empire put roots down here. Today, Cardiff's a city of about 350,000 people, one of the fastest growing in the UK, very much service and knowledge-driven economy, strengths in professional services, fintech, life sciences, creative industries. And what's ironic to me, particularly in the discussion we're about to have, is that the way Cardiff positioned itself as it regenerated from its kind of post-industrial decline in the 80s and 90s was the vision was very much, literally a superlative European capital city, which is really ironic in the context of Brexit. But I think that mindset, going back to the early days of Cardiff, has very much continued the present day. You see it in the diverse population we have. About 25,000 EU citizens, 100 languages spoken in Cardiff. We've got a higher than average percentage of trade with the EU. And you see it in the fact that in the referendum, 60% of the voters in Cardiff voted Remain, which I think I'm right in saying was the highest level of any Welsh local authority. And I think those trends were echoed across the UK, really, where you had urban metropolitan areas voting very differently to their hinterlands. So I think there's a lot to learn, I think, in looking at what cities can now do, particularly in the context of UK cities with the EU, in continuing to maintain and hopefully strengthen those international links. And we know that cities have become increasingly important to global governance, as Sheila was saying. By 2050, 70% of the Earth's population will be living in cities. I don't believe for a second that the pandemic means the death of cities. I think they will just evolve, and we know that jobs and businesses of the future will be created by people coming together to innovate, and cities being a place where young people want to live, to work and play will be key to that. Helpfully as well for my particular cause, cities tend to be places where liberal progressive values come to the fore. So my point is really that cities matter, and also the local government of cities matter as well. And we've seen this in particular, I think, in the UK during our response to the pandemic, where particularly in Wales, in Cardiff, we have led the local test, trace, protect efforts, in contrast to a private outsourced approach in England, and been far more cost effective and far more effective. But also in terms of the way that we have supported the NHS and supported our communities to come through what's been an unprecedented time. So channeled correctly, I think cities and city governments can be brought to bear on any number of the challenges we face as a global society. Be that climate change, addressing inequality, or leading a post-pandemic recovery. It's not just about that, but it's actually recognizing, in my view, we haven't fully recovered from the crash of 2008, and certainly in the UK, probably in Western society, we've not grappled with the Achilles heel of globalization, which has seen the exporting of jobs overseas from traditional industries in traditional communities that subsequently have not recovered. What we've seen, in the wake of that, and particularly in the wake of the financial crash, is an economy marked by low wage growth, low productivity, and rising housing costs. And within that environment, you've created the perfect conditions for populism, particularly when people are angry and desperate for hope. So that then gives the conditions for people to champion easy solutions to complex problems and scapegoat groups of people who are different in some way to other people. And the classic example of this is Brexit in the UK, Trump in the US. And I think forming a coalition based on progressive values is something that Social Democrats and democratic socialists really haven't fully got their head around. We saw it in, I would suggest, in Biden's victory in November. I would draw the example last month to Welsh Labour's much better performance in the elections here than UK Labour's, in the way that we built a coalition around a kind of a civic patriotism, and didn't descend into the nationalism scene in Scotland, and resisted Tory populism as well. So there are examples out there, but I think it's an issue facing social democratic parties across the world, to be honest. So on the role of cities, and I'm keeping an eye on my time, particularly in the UK, I would argue we need greater freedom and flexibilities, and this is very much what Core Cities is about. As a group, we account for about 20% of all the UK's exports, home to 20 million people in our city regions, 40% of university students. Yet despite this, UK cities currently only control about 7% of their tax base. In a North American city, the average is more like 50%. So that is very much fundamental to Core Cities' reason for being. It's about providing local tools to cities to be able to enact the change they want to see. We know that EU cities generally have higher productivity levels and GVA levels than in UK cities. There is much we can learn, but a decentralised system, in my view, is a fundamental, and that's got to go beyond just the niceties of a so-called levelling up agenda, where in effect local authorities are bidding into Whitehall for available cash. But it's more than just the fiscal bottom line, I think, for Core Cities. As a network, we're seeking to use COP26 in Glasgow as an opportunity to foster longer-term international collaboration and dialogue between cities, relevant institutions and representatives networks to share practice and capacity beyond the conference itself. And clearly, city-to-city collaboration at an European level has never been more important. At the Eurocities AGM, Core Cities reaffirmed our commitment to European cooperation post-Brexit. Why? Because in our view, too many of today's challenges won't be fixed by a purely national approach. It's essential that cities collaborate, and within cities at the moment, you've got the desire to do it. And I think what I've seen, even during my time in politics, is a evolving of the relationship between cities from just the simply civic, the traditional twinning arrangements, to ones that are more strategic. For example, Cardiff is part of the Urbact network to encourage positive perceptions around migration and challenging far-right extremism. And through the JPI Europe movement, which we've just joined along with Vienna and Frankfurt, we will look at how we can better provide housing, social services and legal supports to undocumented migrants who are excluded from welfare support by national governments. So I think this demonstrates there is a new internationalism at play, where cities and councils can form new partnerships outside of their administrative boundaries to tackle common problems. And it's not a nice to have. Look at the UK's approach to migration and asylum seekers. It is a handful of cities, including Cardiff, which act as the dispersal areas for the vast majority of these. Our participation in the UK's Vulnerable Person Resettlement Scheme has contributed to reaching the target of resettling 20,000 Syrian refugees from the MENA region. So we will seek in Cardiff to continue our participation in similar schemes in the future, and we'll need to build on how, during the pandemic, the boundaries of public support have been pushed. So, for example, in Cardiff, where previously undocumented migrants were facing having to sleep on the floor of homelessness shelters because they didn't qualify for UK welfare fund, as part of our response, we were able to mainstream a social housing offer then, which played a big part in basically eliminating homelessness in Cardiff during during the lockdown. So I'll end there, Chair. I hope that's given a flavour of some specific examples of international work that we're doing in Cardiff, but also the opportunities I think that can unlock. And I look forward to the Q&A.